Before I welcome Seattle Forum member Michael Verschow from the University of Washington's Business School to the podium to introduce our featured speaker today, I wanted to make a few quick remarks. As many of you know, I am a third-generation Husky, and proud of it. So why ask the University of Washington president to speak to us today? 3 reasons, ironically, none of which have anything to do with it being my alma mater or my being a Husky. First, last year I asked Mark Davis to bring us new leaders in Seattle, new CEOs, the new police chief, anybody new to town, so we could hopefully see them early in their tenure in their new position. In that regard, our speaker today clearly fits the bill. Secondarily, we wanted to bring speakers on current events. Lord knows what's going on in Olympia with budgets today. Again, it's great to hear from somebody who's intimately involved in that. And third, we also wanted to give you some programs about education, not only the University of Washington, but others. You might note that over the next couple of weeks, we're going to have the president of the University of Phoenix, as well as the president of the Cornish School of Art. So we're going to give you a smattering of education of all types at higher education. With that, I'm pleased to welcome Michael Verschow to introduce Mr. Young.
So it's an honor to present University of Washington President Michael Young.
Michael, thank you very much for that introduction. I am delighted, honored, and more than a little bit awed by standing in front of this group today. I know this is the largest Rotary Club in the world, and I think when I was first invited, I didn't know that. And I'm used to much smaller, more intimate groups. And I look out over at this group today and realize that there is, in all likelihood, nothing I'm going to be able to say today that isn't known by at least some substantial part of this group. So I start out with a real appreciation for the opportunity to be here today, and an expression of gratitude of a different sort. I've been now at the University of Washington for about 7 months, and I knew at a certain level that this was a great university. It is ranked consistently, as you look at the global rankings, as the 16th or 17th best university in the entire world. As I have walked around the campus, as I've met professors, as I try to do very frequently, as I spend time in their laboratories, in their classrooms, I have discovered in every respect how well deserved that reputation is. But I also realize something very clearly as I've had an opportunity to be out and about in this community, is that this university is a great university because it has had the support of one of the most imaginative, innovative, engaged communities that I've ever been a part of. And so when I stand in front of, I have a good friend who's a major figure in Southern Baptist world, and every time he stands in front of any Southern Baptist congregation, he stands and he says, "I'm delighted to be in front of the leadership of the Southern Baptist Church." They are very local in what they do. And I stand here in front of the leadership of the University of Washington, and for that I am very grateful. It is an enormous pleasure to be part of this university, a tremendous honor and pleasure to be part of this community, and I stand and want you to know how much we on the campus recognize that that support has been absolutely essential from taking a good university and making it a truly great world-class university. So when I was invited to speak here, it was with great pleasure and a clarity that I accepted. I also am particularly appreciative of the Rotary Club for what you do for our students. Michael, in introducing me, failed to tell you much about the way in which he has connected the Rotary Club to our business school. And the center that he runs has been an extraordinary beneficiary of the work that the Rotary Club does. We have over 125 members of your club who help our student teams who are out there trying to advise and counsel businesses, particularly businesses in areas of the city and the state that are in need of that kind of counseling. Smaller businesses, particularly in underrepresented areas that may have particular need and particular difficulty getting the kind of advice and counsel that can be provided in the first instance by our students, but only provided well and only provided in terms of increasing the likelihood of success because of the mentoring that you provide to our students. And the statistics are extraordinary for what it does for our students. In some survey work that Michael's done, 91% of the students said that the work they had done in that under his center with the mentoring they had received from you had been vital and helped them with their first job after graduation. And that continued. 88% said it helped with their second job as well. Now, we're not sure why they had a second job, but we'll leave that issue to the side. But 88% said it helped with their second job. But that's not all it has done. It has had a remarkable effect in terms of increasing the profitability of these companies, where they have moved from thousands of dollars of profitability to tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars of profitability. The increase in employees directly related to those companies and the advice they received from those teams has been truly remarkable. So it is a real pleasure to stand in front of you and thank you for what you do for this state, for what you do for this community, for what you do for our university, and for what you do for our students. As I was thinking about just a few thoughts I might share with you today, and then with a hope that we could engage in a little more of an interactive conversation, I actually have to confess that I realize you may want to know more about what's going on in Olympia, and I indeed am intimately involved on a very frequent basis with what's going on in Olympia, and therefore I am clueless as to what is actually going on in Olympia. I will tell you that one dimension of Olympia that I will describe is that I have been struck over the past 6 or 7 months with some change in the attitude about higher education down in Olympia. People are still going to cut our budget, I have no doubt about that, but they're more nervous about it and they're more unhappy about cutting it. That, I think, has been, again, very much a function of the way in which the community has stood up and said, our future is reposed in higher education. Our capacity not only to create jobs, to create businesses, but also to create the kind of society and community we want matters. And it matters enormously that our children have an opportunity to have all the education that they're capable of taking advantage of and that they can use on behalf of creating the kind of communities we want. You have been sending that message to Olympia, and that message, I can tell you, is getting through. And that is important and vital, I believe, to the future of the state. But frankly, as important as that is, that's not what I've been spending most of my time on, and that's not what I think is most exciting about what's going on at the University of Washington. And so I thought I'd just take a minute or two and share with you some of the things that are going on, and just give you a little sense of how exciting it is to be in Montlake, how exciting it is to be in Tacoma, how exciting it is to be in Bothell right now at that university. One of the things we've been reflecting on, this is our 150th anniversary, and that is that's pretty impressive when you think about it, but even more impressive when you think about what Seattle was like when the university started. There were about 250 residents. I think there are about 250 people work in the building I'm in now. It was shortly after the first founders arrived here. Seattle really wasn't even quite a city yet, and yet they had a vision to start a great university, and not just a small university, but a great university. Still living in shacks and out of the backs of wagons, nevertheless knew that creating a great society depended on providing educational opportunities, and they created this great university. It was on the frontier. And as I walk around the campus these days, I realize we are still on the frontier. in every way that really matters. We have a wonderful partnership with the Blood Center where they are on the frontier of blood transfusions, and we hope we are providing some small assistance and engagement in that regard. But it hardly matters what is going on. I know the Rotary Club now has a wonderful project going on with respect to malaria, and the reduction of malaria and the tremendous costs that occasions throughout the world. An extraordinarily admirable and wonderful project. And if you're a fraction as effective there as you have been in the other diseases you've taken on, it bodes well for the world. But I also know that we are on the cutting edge in terms of both understanding malaria, understanding, as you may have seen the paper a few weeks ago, that in fact the deaths from malaria are almost twice as high as the previous estimates, which makes your work all that more urgent. But also researchers who are understanding the transmission process, ways in which to prevent that transmission, ways in which you can not only prevent but to cure malaria and the tremendous costs that it occasions. We're on the cutting edge of education and how students learn. We're discovering ways in which one can map the neural pathways in the brain and see what kind of stimulation occurs and what things implant wisdom and knowledge in a child. And what things don't. We're on the cutting edge on the frontier of genetics. We're on the frontier of sustainable environment, on the frontier of developing sustainable biofuels that not only are going to be more effective in terms of reducing pollution with respect to their use, but to revitalize the timber industry in the state of Washington. So 150 years later, we have remained very much on the frontier. And that is a central theme that, as I have looked at the university, have begun to discover, is we are not a university that sits up there in an ivory tower and speculates about great ideas and then moves off to our cocktail receptions. This is a university that's very much like the Northwest. Its sleeves are rolled up. People have their ties loosened and their shovels out and are deeply and profoundly engaged in the world. And that is, I think, the central theme. As I think about anything that defines the university, it really is this notion of idea to impact. It isn't just that things stay up at the university, but we are working assiduously to take the things going on and getting those out into the real world. And let me give you just two or three areas in which that I think is both deep, but something else that I'm particularly going to stress that we expand and develop at the university over the coming few years. The first is that as we think about moving things out of the university into the lives of real people, the capacity to partner with the business community, the capacity to commercialize, the capacity to really find ways to get these things out of the laboratory and into the hospitals, out of the laboratory and out of the workbench onto the bedside, becomes absolutely critical. And that requires a very deep and intimate partnership with the business community. We have a center called the Center for Commercialization that has been revamped considerably over the past few years to try and work closely with the business community and with our professors to make that happen. We're trying to set up programs that reduce the transaction costs so that those are standardized and easy. We're trying to take situations where we're able to move technology from the idea stage through to the first notion of market niche and marketing strategy and how one makes it pencil and it makes it effective, how to get intellectual property protection, and ultimately to proof of concept, a first prototype as well. So we have a number of programs in the school which we are expanding and deepening considerably. The University of Washington has a very long and illustrious track record of creating businesses out of the technology at the university. But our promise to this community is we are going to ramp up those efforts and within the next 3 years double the number of companies that we're able to produce out of university technology to stimulate our economy, to create jobs, but most importantly to take what goes on at the university and put it into the lives of people to make those lives better. But that isn't the only place that we're beginning to see work on idea impact. We're also increasingly finding ourselves, and this is something else that we will be focusing on intensely over the next few years, moving from organizational structures that suggest we have physicists over here and chemists over here and political scientists over here, rather to a structure where we say we are looking at the great challenges that the world faces, challenges of energy, challenges of creating sustainable communities, challenges relating to reducing healthcare disparities, challenges relating to providing healthcare across the globe in an efficient, effective way. These are issues that certainly have global implications, but local implications as well. Healthcare and reducing disparities in healthcare, improving healthcare, its efficiency, its delivery. It's as important to do it in the west side of Seattle as it is in the southern part of Africa. And so these global challenges that we're looking at are also challenges that have great local application as well. And the list is long. Education, K through 12 education. We have a tremendous quality of education at the top of our educational pyramid, but if you look down, we tail out very far, particularly compared to other OECD countries. How do we provide quality education to everybody from as that most beautiful and eloquent prayer suggested, from the moment they're folding their legs together in kindergarten until they walk across the stage with an MD or a PhD or a law degree or a bachelor's degree or a technical degree that allows them to realize their full potential. So these are the ways in which we are beginning to try to pull professors from a range of disparate disciplines, thinking not so much about what does it mean to be a member of the physics department, but what does it mean to think about energy? What does it mean to think about transportation? What does it mean to solve global health inequities and find more ways to do efficient and direct provision of health care? What does it mean to improve K through 12 education? What does it mean to understand the brain? People from probably 12 different disciplines gathering around tables, all the way from theoretical mathematicians to psychologists to people who do neural mapping, all of these sitting together looking at one of these kinds of significant problems as opposed to thinking solely in a disciplinary perspective, which doesn't mean the disciplines go away. It means the disciplines are simply combined and put together to a different kind of use than has historically been true. A third area that I'll just mention really involves ourselves. One of the curious things about universities over the years is that we manage to shine this very intense spotlight on pretty much everything but ourselves. And yet we are at a point where the opportunity and the need to do that have come together. Our students are coming to us with very different kinds of educational, intellectual backgrounds than I think was true 20 years ago. Now, most of you in here are much younger than I am, but still you may remember books, right? Our students don't remember books anymore. They get facts here and there and then sort of sweep them all together, create some sort of conceptual framework into which they put those facts without the same kind of guidance and direction that was true when one has a structured educational experience through the process of learning everything through a book. How do we respond to that? How do we help train them in ways that allow them to use this extraordinary capacity of information out there in a way that is useful and productive and helpful and not simply chaotic and confusing? That's an opportunity for us, but the opportunity also lies in the fact that the technology has evolved in ways that we are going to be able to engage them in an educational process that is to some degree self-generating, to some degree self-organizing, and yet can be directed through the use of technology, I think, in very profound ways that will result in our university not looking very much like it does now 10 years from now. University of Washington, I believe, is in a position to be very much on the cutting edge of that. Not only the quality of our faculty and the work that goes on, the brilliance of our students, but you add to that the areas in which the university is particularly strong coincide with the places this community is particularly strong in the technology areas, and give us an opportunity, I think, to lead the way in looking at what higher education is going to look like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now. That's exciting. People sometimes ask me why I left the sunny ski slopes of Utah and came to Seattle. And that's the answer. There are opportunities to do things at this university because of the community we're situated in, because of the tremendous base that this community has built at that university, to do things that I think no other public university in the nation can do. And that's exciting. And so I end where I started, which is both thanks to you, as well as a plea for your continued engagement in the university. As I talk to legislators, I guess I will come back to that briefly, they often say, we would like to give more money to education, but we're so concerned about social services and other sorts of needs. And my initial reaction is twofold, which is we do not want to pit the university against social services. It is as important to us that people have health care, they have housing, they have jobs, as it is to anybody. We do not pit ourselves against each other. At the same time, it's also important to remember that there is no program in the world more calculated to reduce the need for social services. No program in the world calculated to produce better health, higher education levels, more civic engagement, more charitable engagement than college education. We are the only proven program that does that in every single respect. And so we are a social service program as well as everything else to create the kind of community, to create the kind of world, to give the kinds of opportunities to people who are prepared, inclined, and desirous of taking advantage of them. It's an exciting time to be a Husky. It's an exciting time to be a Cougar. It's an exciting time to be well, I was going to say a duck, but it's never exciting to be a duck. But it's an exciting time to be at these great universities. It is an exciting time to have the support that this great university has from this community. So thank you very much, and I would be happy to entertain a question or two.
President Young, Herb Bridge.
Very fine address. Your predecessor was very much of the opinion that intercollegiate athletics reflected the leadership of a university along with academia. What is your feeling on that?
I'm a big supporter of intercollegiate athletics if it's done right, and I think we are doing it right. I look out at 650 kids, some substantial number of whom would not have a chance for higher education if it weren't for the athletic programs. I look at the degree of enthusiasm and engagement it generates. I also look at the extent to which people who get engaged and interested in our sports programs so frequently come and get engaged in other parts of the university as well. My athletic director often describes intercollegiate athletics as sort of the front porch of the university, and I think that's a good image. It needs to fit the house. You know, you can't let it get outsized. You've got to make sure it's all the stairs are nailed down and stable, and it's done with ethics and integrity. But it also is the place that leads to the front door. And I have been, throughout my career, very pleasantly surprised at the way in which athletics can often help draw people into other parts of the university. And almost every one of our major athletic donors donates considerably to other parts of the university as well. So when you put all of that together, I think it is a powerful part of higher education. I do think I do think we need to make some changes. We had the opportunity of being in Indianapolis with 49 other presidents to a retreat that Mark set up, and I'm not sure he anticipated the results, but the results were pretty strongly worded suggestions about some things that need to be done. But to his credit, he's got committees that are actually making some of those changes as we speak. I was a little more outspoken on a couple of the issues, and I thought being outspoken, I would also be spoken over. But the truth of the matter is, these set up committees are going to do look at those things as well. So we have things we need to do. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But I think on balance, they make a real contribution to the institution. They're fun. The kids have a great time. Engaged in support of athletics. It brings gives our donors and our alumni and our friends a great connection. And people say it's entertainment. It's great entertainment. It absolutely is. It's fun. And I think it's worth doing. I think there are a lot of positive benefits that come out of it, if it's done right.
President Young, out here to your left.
Thank you very much. You spoke to us about education, about health care. You spoke to us about your role in connection with business. Now you spoke to us about athletics. Can you tell us a little bit about the role of liberal arts in a university that's among the top 20 in the world?
Absolutely, and I really appreciate that question because I think both the liberal arts and the arts and humanities are absolutely critical. I mean, I'm always taken by, John Adams wrote this wonderful letter to one of his sons once in which he said, and I'm not nearly as eloquent, so I'm going to paraphrase, but essentially he said, I study war and politics, that you may study business and economics, that your sons may study art and literature and humanities. I think that's a pretty good description, that it is central. I mean, humanities really comes from the notion of what it means to be human. And as one of my researchers at the University of Utah told me, he won a Nobel Prize. This is a great, great scientist. This isn't a person excusing his profession, but he said to me, he said, Mike, I can tell you how to clone a mouse. But he said, I can't tell you whether you should. He said, I can't tell you what the social implications are. I can't tell you those things. I can tell you how to do it. I can't tell you whether you should. And I thought, what a perfect description of the need for all of these disciplines to be powerful in a university like ours. And I think that's important that we keep that balance. When I was at the University of Utah, we built a new humanities building, and it's a beautiful building. The only contribution I really made to it, besides doing what presidents usually do, which is sort of hold their hands out and raise money and cut the ribbon, the only contribution I made is I said, it's not going to be on the edge of campus. I want it right in the middle of campus. It is in many ways the center of what we do. And I want it in the middle of campus, and that's where we built it. And so I think it's very important that we foster those as well. And indeed, one of the things we find as we do more of this interdisciplinary work, even in, say, the educational area, for example, you find so much, theater, art, the visual arts and music and so forth, be really extraordinary in terms of learning, not just learning art and music, but of learning mathematics and learning all these other things. It's very clear that we are, as human beings, constructed to be very broad. And the great thing about a great university is we have a chance to foster all of that. So it is a central part of what we do, and it will remain a central part of what we do.
President Young, Lulun question.
How are you dealing, given your financial challenges at the university, how are you dealing with attracting and retaining faculty in a very competitive world?
People keep asking me, there's this sort of Harvard Business School question, what's the one thing that keeps you up at night? They always ask you. And now my wife will tell me it's usually chocolate and Coke, but the truth of the matter is what keeps me up is faculty retention. We have an extraordinary faculty. They are the heart and soul of this, and the rest is just bricks and mortar. So keeping faculty is very, very important. I think we are working to deploy resources particularly for faculty retention right now in a modest way. We need to move past this current budget situation. The salary freeze must be lifted for us. Because we don't compete just in the local market. And when when other people are telling me, well, where the professor's going to go, that's often the reply I get. Now, I'll tell you exactly where they're going to go. They're going to go to Harvard, they're going to go to Columbia, they're going to go to Stanford, because that's who's coming after our professors, and those schools don't have financial problems. In fact, around the country, if you look, just saw a study that said the average reduction across the United States in public support for higher education over the last 3 years has been a reduction of 4%. Washington is 44%. Our budget has been cut over 50% by the state. So it is a real problem. And if we hollow out the university, it only takes a few years to kill a good university. It takes a lot of years to build it. And so this is something that I spend an enormous amount of time looking for streams of revenue that will allow us to do it. And interestingly, every stream of revenue at the university has increased, and has increased really considerably, except state funding. Our research funding this year was $1.5 billion, which is highest of any public university in the United States. In fact, second in the United States, only to Johns Hopkins. I was talking to John Hennessy at Stanford recently, and I think they get about $1.2 billion or something, and I said I could help John, build his university into a better university, just do what we do. So that's terrific. Fundraising, our donors have been extraordinarily generous. Our commercialization revenues have increased. Some of our contracting revenues have gone up as well. The one source that's gone down is state funding, and that is tremendously worrisome. We are doing everything we can to keep faculty, because that is, I believe, at the end of the day, my number one priority.
Young David Woodward.
Greetings from one dog to another. We, Rotarians are very engaged globally, and in higher ed, it's quite common now to talk about the global institution, and UW's been referred that way. But some institutions you've referenced, Stanford, for example, are really ahead of the game in globalization. Now that you've been there a while, what are your thoughts about how the UW is progressing to becoming truly a global institution, and what is the prospect for the institution?
Interestingly, I would modify the question just a little bit. We actually have been one of the truly globally engaged universities. We're one of only 2 public universities that have 8 of the Title IX national resource centers for different global areas. They're very competitive. They require that you have a fairly broad range of courses and research going on, study abroad opportunities, and so forth. And we're one of only two public universities in the country, and one of only 4 universities altogether to have 8. So that we have study abroad. We have actually a physical presence in Rome. We have a physical presence in Spain. We have an office in Beijing. We have a fairly large percentage of our students who study abroad. So those things are there. What I do think is, I think we probably have it's probably slipped a little in the past few years, in part because it's expensive to do a lot of that. And I think I had the opportunity of spending some time with our Jackson School Board of Advisors, real visionaries about what needs to be done. And I was pleasantly struck by the fact that we really were deeply in sync. Because at the end of the day, borders simply don't matter. People, goods, money, ideas, and as Paul Ramsey will tell me, germs, all cross borders seamlessly. And that's the world we're sending our kids out into. But it's also the case that almost anything we study has really significant international implications to it. And so organizing ourselves around thinking about big challenges, I think, necessarily pushes us into a way in which we have to confront the global dimension of virtually everything we're doing. And I don't want to see us have a global operation here and then the rest of the university here. I want in every department, I want in every college and every school, people who are doing comparative and international work as part of their daily routine for the work they're doing. And I think as we think about organizing ourselves in a way to address some of those, that's a necessary, it's inevitable, but it's also absolutely essential that we do that. Thank you. Again, thank you.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.